Unusual. And the unusual area that we will be looking at, we're continuing the theme as we will be for some months, looking at individual figures in history who we've excavated remains about, we've got a wonderful history about, and this is no such exception. This is Ljubljana woman from Slovenia. And Ljubljana woman, it's an unusual find that we look at with Ljubljana woman. And to be honest with you, I've become very distracted this week by this ape find that I had the report from last week. To be honest with you, I actually thought it was a fake, and then I started digging into it, and I wish I hadn't. And I wish I was going to call you, Goff, to get your advice on this, and I will talk about what those areas were towards the break. But for the time being, we're going to be looking at Ljubljana woman. And I know one of you is going to mention it. Turn out the light, which I just did. Do you know, I am predicting when Kathy's going to say things, right? She's also going to say, whenever you're speaking, make sure you put the apostrophe in the right place. Mm-hmm. That's in there.
And not too loudly.
And don't speak too loudly. All that's good.
Can we level it up a bit, please? And make it bigger.
Oh, first.
And move to the side.
Oh. Do you want to say anything, Chris, as well while you're there? You know, that can do. I don't think you should do. Right. Okay. And also when I went to Treharris in the week, I visited a friend of mine called David, who I've known for many years, and he said to me, "Would you like to come and look at a green patch of ground?" And there was a really 1.5 metre thick wall, which was an old 1.5 metre thick wall running across this area, but the developers were told to leave. Now the children are picking hell out of it and stuff. And I do believe I've identified, it was identified already, but I do believe in my own mind I've identified a very much unknown monastic Grange boundary wall. And I was thinking this, and I thought, actually, I looked at the aerial photography, and there were so many trenches dug across the site to find this monastery. And the walls just been sort of left there to decay. And it was a really interesting find, smack bang in the middle of a housing estate. You do get things being saved smack bang in the middle of housing estates, but it's very rare these days. So, all the banter done, we're going to be going to a place that we never ever visit, which is otherwise known as Slovenia. And we're going to be visiting the location of a grave of a woman whose the meaning of that grave has wide-ranging implications for early Christianity. And we'll come into the story as we build into it. And Ellen, I'm always thinking of you late at night, and I'm thinking, what does Ellen need from a lecture? She needs a map. So Ellen, just to wind, okay, I know Germany's up here, Austria's here, Italy's here, and this used to be old Yugoslavia, and you've still got a question.
No, I went like this, like, the UK. We all know that, don't we? Yes. Spot on. Excellent.
God, should I stop now, Gillian, while I'm ahead?
Yeah,
That's good.
This is another sign.
See, anyway, so I felt when I was developing these lectures is that the levels, the numbers of women that, the remains of women that have been excavated are very limited. So I just, I had to trawl the internet, and I thought, right, this would be a great location to look at. And it's a great location to look at because this is, there's Ljubljana there, and here is the extensive area of a Roman cemetery, which happened. Come in.
Sorry. I'm going to have to get you to move your car. Because
Okay.
I'm cleaning because it's on the actual road.
Okay, I will move it. Okay. Right, let's get into the flow. Ljubljana woman. Right. Okay.
12 o'clock.
So we were saying, Ljubljana itself. Stop it. Ljubljana itself is the heart of a large Roman city, and you've got lots of indications of a Roman city itself that went into the Christian era, and the evidence from the Christian era itself is not just borne out in remains that were constructed, are actually borne out, they thought, before 2016, 2017, they thought maybe we might actually find Christian burials. And those Christian burials themselves are absolutely fascinating, and one in particular, the woman of Ljubljana. And that's why we're doing it, because she is a very important figure in history. We don't actually have a name for her. Most of the other figures that we'll be looking at over the next few months and already have actually got names to them. Otzi the Iceman, I don't think he was never called that in the first place. We've actually got a name. But this is just Ljubljana woman. It's going into a wonderful city that's seen massive changes. Ljubljana is part of the old Yugoslavian landscape. Slovenia itself was one of those states that broke away from the old Yugoslavia, and it's a city itself that's seen war in the First and the Second World War. Much before that as well, it's seen the ethnic problems of the later part of the 1900s, and most of its remains, strangely enough, have either survived or actually been rebuilt. They've had a wonderful rebuilding scheme of the archaeology throughout Yugoslavia, due to all the terrible warring between the factions that have occurred very, very recently, in very recent memory. And what they're doing now, they're modernising a large number of the cities across old Yugoslavia, particularly with those up and growing states like Slovenia and Croatia. And they're using their past to actually enrich their future. And by doing that, they need to undertake the archaeological excavations in a very modern, very methodical way. And they need to bring people's attention to the archaeology that they're finding. And this site is no such exception. And in fact, what they're doing, you look at the trenches and you look at the level of excavation, and what they're doing, first image of the remains at Ljubljana. You can see that this is smack bang in the middle of the street. So they lifted the whole centres of streets to put new drainage and new electricity in, the new internet in, and all these other things to sort of lay it through the streets so you can get it out of the way of going above. If you notice, there's none of these sort of telegraph lines and all the rest of it. It goes underground to keep the beauty of these wonderful cities throughout the old Yugoslavian Republic. And below that surface, as we intimated, there might actually be Roman remains, Roman burials associated with this exaggeratedly large cemetery. And even within that one area, within that sort of one street landscape being excavated 2017 and onwards, they found 350 graves just in that one street. So underneath all those houses is a huge cemetery. Strangely enough, are these remains to be found within the heart of the old Roman city? Probably yes, but I can't say anything more than that because the whole heart of the Roman city has been built upon. To try and interpret what's going on is very fraught with difficulty. We don't have... Quickly, Andrea.
Can I ask how long the Romans were there?
The Romans were there for a very, very long time. When I say a very, very long time, you're talking about the Romans really interested in this landscape where Ljubljana is for the best part of 200 years before they really start to establish the city, just before the birth of Jesus Christ. So you've got colonies and all the rest of it within this landscape, Greek colonies, and then you've got the Roman colony, and then you've got the Roman city, and then you've got the sense of Roman Christianity. I keep banding on about this, don't I, Kathy? That the great legacy of Rome is in fact Christianity. Mary Beard said that, and it was an absolute public uproar. Mary Beard saying that the great legacy of Rome is in fact Christianity. I remember the great uproar in the media, but it's actually true, very true statement. She was very much on the line of academia by saying that, but it's proven to be very right. Very much in Lantwick Major, the early Christianity. Actually, I'm actually starting to see the history of Lantwick Majors being rewritten. Years ago, when Lantwick Major you used to read, this was a pagan area. Saints came in and Christianised the area in the 500s, 600s, and that's what you used to see. Now I'm seeing, there was an early Roman community here, really early Roman Christianity, and then the saints come in and reinforce the Christianity that was already here. It's history being rewritten. But one thing that we need to look at in the ground is actually the archaeology itself. What the archaeology tells you. And the archaeology tells you that not only that we've got burials, but these burials are associated with Roman Christianity. And an individual that was buried there, that all these tombs radiate from. There's one individual, she was buried there. She's a very important person. And they built a Christian shrine above her. Hang on a minute, she's a woman. Oh, she's a Christian. Oh, what's she doing being a woman? Because, in fact, early Christianity was about women and men. What we do see is with the catacombs of Rome, what you do see is as Christianity was still a cult in the 200-300s, what you see is female priests, female Christian priests. And that became all outlawed eventually. And then the church has actually come back to having women as representatives for the church. Obviously you have got nuns and all the rest of it, but to actually have priests who were women was later an anathema. It was just something that was thrown out the window. But earlier on, this one individual proves that women were very important to early Christianity. And that's why all the men are buried around her and all the women are buried around her. And this is what some of these are here. There's rows and rows of them. So they're probably building within the foundations of the old Roman city in the 300s when Christianity is starting to become a recognised religion. Diocletian, in fact, in the 300s, is said to still tar Christians in the Colosseum in Rome and set them alight. But within a decade or so, Christianity started to become a revered, respected and understood religion of the Roman world. And on the deathbed of the great Constantine the Great in around can't say in around 337, we're saying 337. His mother, Helena, would say, right, convert to Christianity. Just come over to Christianity. And he did on his deathbed. He said, I'm a Christian. And overnight, Christianity became the religion of the Roman world. And within 60 years, the only religion in the Roman world was Christianity. Every other religion was outlawed. Paganism was completely outlawed. And then the format of how Christianity goes is the same format, believe it or not, as Islam goes. And it's said that Mehmed, when he captured Constantinople in 1453, was said to refounding the Roman world within the old eastern capital of the Roman world at Constantinople. So all these things are strangely, weirdly interlinked. In fact, the religion of Islam is the embodiment of early Christianity. Strangely enough, it sounds nuts, but this is what the Muslims fought in 1453. Look it up, mark my words. So here we've got tomb after tomb after tomb after tomb, and one special tomb indeed, with a church erected above her shrine, as it were. She became the first saint, as it were, one of the first saintly beings within this landscape of the Christian world in the 300s. And we only look at one or two objects, but the one or two objects that we actually do see are intriguing. Interestingly enough, female archaeologist directing the excavations there as well. So she wants to say, we've got, the new world of Slovenia. It's not. When you look at the disciplines of archaeology and geology and all the rest of it, you think in these old Eastern Bloc countries, it's going to be men coming out of the universities excavating the archaeology. There are a lot of female archaeologists who are seeing that the archaeology is extremely important in these places like Slovenia. This isn't a We Are Feminist lecture today. I just want to give you another perspective of how archaeology is examined. Those great archaeologists of the past, Schliemann, male, Wheeler, male, seem to dominate what we think and what we believe is archaeology. But we forget about Kathleen Kenyon, we forget about Dorothy Garrett, we forget about all these female archaeologists. It's good to remember that archaeology is to be seen by all as representing the past, not seen by men as representing a male perspective. Maybe if I did this series of lectures in 10 years' time, we would have 50% women represented in the archaeology as famous figures being excavated as much as we do male. It's slowly building up that way. So, here we go. And there she is excavating. So, excavations beneath Gospaster Street in downtown Ljubljana. I was saying Ljubljanka, wasn't I? Sorry, I meant Ljubljana. Revealed remains of the Roman settlement of Emona, which would eventually become the modern capital of Slovenia. Sorry about the Ljubljana thing. Ljubljana. It's only a slight difference there.
Ljubljanka's the Moscow prison, isn't it?
Yeah.
My mother-in-law was in there.
It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. It's a slight mistake. I do admit I make mistakes. So excavations beneath Ljubljanka revealed remains of the Roman settlement of Emona, which would eventually become the modern capital of Slovenia. It's quite interesting that we've got the heart of Christian civilization building within Slovenia, in Ljubljana. And the remains themselves are in a very fine state of preservation. As you look there, you've got a pipe running through, and it seems to miss the archaeology. There is more than one burial within this plot here. There's more than one. So obviously these are family burials, and they've got 350 at least the remains of bodies in a fine state of preservation being found with artefacts on east-west alignments and south-north alignments, and they are all Christian. So what have I just said? I've actually just said what Ljubljana tells us is not only you've got a large Christian community there, and basically Christianity takes over the city within a very early stage. That's the first fact. The other fact as well is you've got goods that are buried with these Christians. Now, rule of thumb was, years ago, if you excavate a body from the Roman period, and you're trying to work out if they're Christian or pagan, you find out that they're Christian because they're buried with no grave goods. That's nonsense. The other thing as well is, what do we always think when we're looking for burials in a church graveyard? They're obviously all going to be east-west alignments. Or west-east alignments, depending on which way you want to look at it. And that's what we're always told. But in fact, that's exactly not the case here. There's south-north alignments, east-west alignments, and they're all Christian burials. And guess how we know that they're all Christian burials? You couldn't be buried here because Christianity was the only religion in the Roman world. So by that, they were all Christian. Whatever alignment they were being buried on. If you look at the church in Cowbridge, you'll notice the alignment of the church isn't in fact facing towards the east. So these little things, you can't always have a rule of thumb anymore, and that's a very important message that I'm actually giving you. So Ljubljana itself and the burials and what's found with these burials also tell us of the importance of the religion, and also tells us of the wealth of the individuals. And the wealth of the individuals has a very keen implication to explain something else. Alan, what was the Roman world lacking in the 350s?
Romans.
Okay, I know that. Okay, that's too obvious. Right, start again. What was the Roman world lacking in the late, in say the 350s? What was it lacking?
Money.
Gold. It was lacking gold. Except these people buried here are buried with a large amount of gold. So you know where all the gold is going? It's being buried with people. So archaeologists puzzle over mystery woman in early Christian cemetery. Buried beside a stunning blue glass drinking bowl, the woman may have been the first interred at the site, with others eager to be near her in the afterlife. Christian evolution. When a large construction project was launched within Gospaster Street in downtown Ljubljana, in August 2017, Slovenian archaeologists in this ancient city naturally anticipated some interesting discoveries, and they were so right. But what they didn't expect to find was an unusual glimpse into an early Christian community and the important and as yet unknown woman its members chose to spend their afterlives close to. And this itself is one of the most spectacular pieces of glasswork I have ever seen. Look at that. It's absolutely exquisite. It's absolutely perfect.
Is it intact?
It's absolutely intact. And what you have two little glass eyes on either side, and they've been buried with this woman. This is the Roman world at its best. And the reason why we say it's the Roman world at its best is because it dictates what the Roman world is. And what the Roman world is not just a microcosm of Rome itself. It's a complete plethora. It's a complete cosmopolitan world. It's a complete cosmopolitan landscape of everything. You see goods being buried at this Ljubljana site coming from northern England, the Jet, for example. You see this bowl itself coming all the way from Syria. You see possibly that maybe the individual may have been buried in silk. I'm not exactly sure on that one. But that silk itself would have come from the far eastern world. And we've got lead. The person's buried in a little bit of a lead coffin. There's another story there. But and the other thing as well is a language. What's Rome known for? It's known for its languages. It's known that you could have been born, strontium analysis, you could have been born in, for example, Egypt, and then you were buried in northern England. And we know that everyone in Rome, the Roman world, moved around. It was a great sort of trading landscape. So it's no surprise by the time we get to the Viking world in Britain that trading landscape is still going on. You can hear the Arabic language being heard in the streets of York itself. But that's obviously much later. When we go to Ljubljana as well, we see the Greek lettering on this bowl. And if your eyes are keen enough, you can actually see grapes and vine leaves. Now this is the Christian world. Kathy, you know what I'm going to say now, don't you? This is the Christian world. And the Christian world borrowed so much from all those other civilizations that the Roman world dominated. Dionysus, for example, you could say the goddess of wine, but I could also say that Saturnalia could be seen to be the goddess of wine and jollity. But Dionysus loved her grapes, and she loved her wine. Pardon?
His. Dionysus was male.
Glad to be corrected.
Yeah.
So there was always those senses of gods and what they represented and goddesses on the artifacts being traded and moved around the Roman world itself. And grapes, Greek writing, and this made its way into that Christian burial. And if we look, my notes tell me with this blue glass bowl, a little more than 8 inches in diameter. So it's not huge, but it survived completely intact. 100% intact. 100% intact. Now, you would think it was even when you find things in a sarcophagus, right, in a stone sarcophagus, glass has a tendency, because of changes in time, moisture and giving and going, and glass wants to get back to its original silicate state, is not really going to survive. But it actually completely survived intact alongside her. So the meaning of this bowl is a pagan meaning now in a Christian context. So that's a very important point. Moving on again. The capital of this small Central European country was established as a Roman settlement known as Amona over 2,000 years ago, populated by thousands of colonists driven out of northern Italy by land shortages. and joined by veterans of the wars that helped to establish the empire. That's a nice subtlety. So before the Romans started to establish cities over here, there was already something there. From previous excavations in the area, the archaeologists knew that part of the Roman cemetery likely lay under this street, and that more ancient graves would be discovered, but not 350. And there she is. There she is, beautifully preserved. Now, it's good that I've got people observing things. On Monday, it didn't mention it in my notes at all. But if you look around the outside, you can't really see it. You can actually see a little bit of lead lining the outside. Yeah? And it's strange, this, because it's only the bottom part of the lead coffin itself. So stone sarcophagi, so the lead coffin itself, there's only part of it intact. There's a little bit of a tray in there. And it makes you wonder what's happened to the rest of the lead. Maybe that's how she was buried, on a lead tray. Maybe they needed to remove the lead a little bit later to pay for the building of the church. If that was the case, the glass bowl would have been broken. Don't really know what's going on. So this provides the scientists with the opportunity to better understand how the residents of the Roman Ammonia lived and died, and moreover the importance of Christianity. So if we look at it, we just sort of, this is a typical type of thing that we would find, the stone coffin itself. I don't know if any of you ever went to a Chilean 35 years ago, and you went to the amphitheatre. And when you go into the amphitheatre, on the right there was a little shop type thing, and alongside it there was several of these stone sarcophagi in a line. I remember seeing it now. I don't know what happened to those stone sarcophagi, because I don't think they're all in the museum. But anyway, there was only stone sarcophagi. And when people find these stone sarcophagi, before they start getting interested in archaeology in the 1900s, they would empty the sarcophagi and use them as water troughs or something. Time and again, didn't we in Time Team, they used to wander around somebody's farm and used to say, oh, there's a water trough there, that's got to be a Roman sarcophagi. It's only usually half the time that it turned out to be a Roman sarcophagi, but there was one particular episode that they did find one. So these Roman sarcophagi, but this is completely intact. It's got a lid on it. It's got the content still intact in there, and that again gives you the sense of dedication that the body was actually left, and was left and revered and wasn't looted. It's quite likely that this individual's name was eventually forgotten, because eventually, about 100 odd years later, the Huns crashed this city. Burnt everything down and destroyed everything. Well, maybe that's not exactly true, because all these burials still contain their wealth. They weren't looted, so maybe we can rewrite history a little bit there. Maybe the Huns did go there, thought, oh, we can't be bothered, and it just went off. But again, this figure, she's intriguing. She's got a lot of meaning, lots of meaning. The excavations ultimately revealed a large Roman complex cemetery of 350 burials within that street itself. So we don't know what's under the houses either side. What we do know is some of the burials, sort of, you've got the trench here, and a little, you can see the end of it. We know there's more under there and more on that side. There's more under there. So I think those are included as well, but they haven't been excavated because they can't be. And ranging from simple graves and sarcophagi to family mausolea are centred around the burial chapel, with the burial underneath containing the important remains of this individual. The archaeologist, Slovenian archaeologist Andrea Kaspari, has been heading the excavations there, and the local Christian community flourished after the last major state persecution under Diocletian that I've just mentioned. And obviously things went on there in a very high state for a very long period of time, until the Christian community was forgotten. And look at this. And you can see this here. Only the wealthy citizens of Mona could afford to be buried in a stone sarcophagus. And there is actually more than one stone sarcophagi found there, because there's actually one alongside it as well. So obviously this is our friend here. She was buried in this one. You know she was buried in this one because you see in the other image there's a little line around the outside before they've removed everything from in there. And it's interesting the way they're lifting it as well. So they've obviously thought about this. So they're bracing it on the side with two of the slabs so they can lift her up without the whole thing collapsing. So you've got an intact sarcophagus. They've got to remove these things simply because the roadworks and so on with the sewage and all the rest of it's going to go down to this level. That's why they've had to excavate it in the first place. I don't know what's happened to the human remains, but that's for them to work out, not for me to discuss today. So chisels from limestone. This is very good limestone, very very fine limestone. Limestone is a really poor building material, as you can tell with the outside of this building. It flakes and sort of decays and so on. But if you've got the right limestone, you can make wonderful works out of it, such as these sarcophagi being excavated at this site of Ljubljana. I've got to keep saying Ljubljana because if I don't, I'll start saying something else. So the most stunning artefacts recovered beneath Gosbeckia Street was the transparent blue glass bowl, which we will see again next to the woman's body. And it dates possibly to around maybe about the 350s. 350 bodies, 350 is about the date for it. Grapes and vines. A Greek inscription on the inside of the bowl instructs the owner to, I'm not going to read out the Greek, but we'll do the English. Drink to live forever, for many years. Cynically, I think it was talking about the object itself, the bowl, because the glass object has lasted forever, as much as the remains of the body as well. The exquisite drinking bowl could have been used in both regular daily life as well as for burial ceremonies. Agree or disagree with that, it doesn't matter. The chemical composition and the purity of the chemical composition, the fact that it hasn't degraded to any serious level, it proves it's from the Eastern Mediterranean region. And if anyone ever gets out to go to my Sully walks, there's a woman who comes onto it called Barbara Baggs, who's usually got she's got glass earrings made of glass objects from Roman sites, and she's got a glass necklace that she's shown me, made out of Roman glass. She's very much into her glass stuff, and it's really wonderfully blue. It's a perfect purity of blue. If anyone ever got a copy of my Romans in the Vale of Glamorgan book, still available in the back of my car for a tenner. I thought I'd put that in. I haven't done it usually, but in that you'll read about me mentioning blue glass beads because they're so, the blue glass is beautiful. Transparent and translucent as well. Wonderful light as it streams through it. The grapevine decorations have their role in the Christian Eucharist and communion. There you go. So Christianity's borrowing. So obviously you drink the blood of Christ with the wine, associated with the old traditions of the Greek and Roman world, where people would drink wine for various different reasons, and the association with Dionysus, the pagan god of wine and ecstasy. Archaeologists are also interested in how the woman's tomb developed over time. It seems that possibly within a decade of her burial, the original square chapel above was demolished and a very, very large structure erected above, with her importance growing. A form of early church, just under 10 metres in length, and just over 10 metres in length, I should say, by about 10 metres wide. Around the new structure inside, a monist Christian community began to practice a certain type of burial known as ad sanctos, in which the deceased are interred near the tombs of saints and other remains considered holy. And it goes against all the grains of everything that we really understand about Christian burial and Christian worship back in the day. So what I'm thinking we'll do, we'll look at a couple. We'll look at, I think, one more image, and we'll take a break as I'm starting to wear out. Bless. Actually, I had to warn people on Monday and Sunday because I've got because years ago my feet were badly damaged. I'm starting to feel it now, and if my foot does give way, then you know what's happened. The woman honoured in the chapel. Who was the woman honoured in the chapel? A good question. If archaeologists are correct that she was the first person to be buried in the cemetery, because everything radiates out from her, and that her grave played the central role in the necropolis, she was likely a very distinguished person in Roman Amona. Her social status, religion, affiliation and place of birth, however, are only a matter of speculation for now, but we know she was Christian. Planned analysis of her physical remains should hopefully answer some of these questions in the future. Strontium analysis. In the meantime, most of the valuable finds are on display, safekeeping, in the City Museum of Ljubljana. So we'll look at one more image. We've seen that one. We'll come back to that after the break.
How do they know everything's radiated from her if they haven't managed to dig up everything else? It's a city.
Yeah.
It's because the tomb's in the middle, and all the tombs, all the other burials go out from it like that. Yeah, like that. This is why some are in the south. Some are in the south north, some are in a north south, some are in the east west, some are in west east. So basically, this is why she's the central axle of the cemetery itself. So probably what we're going to do now. We've already seen this image, and you can obviously see the extension of the burials. And in a way, you can work out that what's below the surface is no more than about 2 meters below the surface. And other than the pipework here, it's all relatively finely intact. Right, are there any questions?
Yes.
Go for it.
Isn't it go one more?
I can go back. I can go back, yeah.
Go forward.
There.
Yes, that one. Go back.
Oh. Actually, this one is the same as the other one that we've seen,
Make it bigger.
but in the other way around. Right, here we go. This is the same one, yeah.
Much bigger, and then go down the picture a bit so you can see bottom right. Across a bit to the left.
There.
Yeah, what about that mermaid? That tail.
Oh, shut up! Basically, if you look there, there's 2 sets of skeletal remains. One that, if I could work out, well, hang on, have we got a north-south? One basically, this is, there's the head of one there. If we go down a bit further, there's another head of one coming in there as well. So they're actually buried, mermaid, exactly. Top and tailed, there you go. So
is it unusual to have a burial like that with it all radiating out from a central point? I've never heard of that before.
Well, actually, I'm going to give you another little story, right? And the other little story is, this is also to do with Bag's bag. Barbara from Sully. She was, years ago when they were excavating the Roman cemetery at the back of Landok Church in Landok Hospital, that area. When they found all the they excavated over 1,000 sets of human remains, and smack bang in the middle of the cemetery was a circular area with a shallow ditch around it, and all the ones around the outside were inhumation burials, hadn't been cremated, and then the ones in the middle, this area here, were the cremated remains of children and other individuals, and they all radiated out from that point. It's these children in the middle were important to them. However, wherever else you go in the Roman world, bodies of children are not to be seen as sacred or anything. In the pagan world, the bodies of children are discarded in waste tips, and usually, unless you get to a certain age, you're not relevant. You're not to be buried in any kind of order. Even if you got a child that you didn't want a girl, or you didn't want a boy, or you've had too many, or you're a prostitute and you want to get rid of your children, you would put them into the local dump. You'd put them there, and hoping that some other mother would come along and pick up your child and look after it. That's what pagan Roman world used to say. But sort of in the sort of Roman in the sort of Roman Christian order of things, the purity of early Christianity, that's what I call it, the purity of early Christianity, when Christianity actually means something. Sorry if I've insulted anybody by saying that. When Christianity has that sense that you don't go out to war and you don't kill people. If you do, you've got to have a very good reason, all that type of stuff. And the whole point with all this is that things evolve to have these spaces where people revere somebody in Ljubljana and radiate from them, and have this central round burial at Landok and radiate from them. So there's a sense of meaning. Later on in Christianity, that goes out the window. If a child hasn't been baptised or christened, you can bury them somewhere else. You're not burying them in a church graveyard. Mothers and fathers would head into the church graveyard at night to bury their children in consecrated ground because they were not allowed to legally. So all this was that's what the norm became in Christianity. But Christianity initially was a really nice, kind, understanding religion that is nothing like it is today, in some cases. Because there are lots of good Christians out there. Not digging a hole there, but some parts of Christianity have got very bad.
Comparing the 1500s, we had the Crusades and things that were 1200s.
Yeah.
They were pretty bad.
Yeah, that started by about the 1090s, 1190s, and all the rest of it. They were terrible things, those Crusades. Absolutely terrible. One religion going against another religion over... Saladin would say that Christians could continue their Christian worship as long as they're living in a Muslim city under Muslim laws. The Christians didn't allow Muslims to practice. That's how fair things were. And this is the ventant anger of different religions has been built up from all this friction. And it's the sense that I'm sure a Muslim coming up against a Catholic would treat a Catholic differently than a Greek Orthodox. Probably treat a Greek Orthodox with respect, but definitely not a Catholic. And it's the same way round as well. So all this is really important. Early Christianity was very different than it is today, in lots of cases, but not all. There are good Christians.
It was much more pagan like then, because instead of facing east on the day of judgment when you're resurrected, you faced your important woman.
Exactly, and that important woman there, that's an important point. Very important. Right, we'll take a break there now. What I'm going to say is I'm just going to remind you of a few things before I completely... So obviously we will talk about the new find in Germany. We'll do the usual collections and stuff. I'll try and sort out the raffle stuff because some of you ain't here. And if anyone is interested in this doing Barry on the 22nd of December, it's 1:30 to about 3:30. We'll be providing mince pies and wine. And anyone who does want to come to Barry on a Wednesday, sometimes a Tuesday, then let me know if they want to look at our books and all the rest of it. There's lots of books on the Romans, Alan. Right, if there's no more questions, let's take a break. So, in a way, this image is showing you something else about our Ljubljana woman. We've already mentioned it. Not all the bodies were interred in stone sarcophagus or a brick and stone lined tomb either. Not all of them were placed in mausolea or a family tomb or a crypt or whatever you want to call it, all those different words. Some were actually placed in wooden coffins. Some were placed in wooden coffins with grave goods. Some were placed in wooden coffins without grave goods. I'm not saying that all of them had grave goods, but a substantial number did. And it goes on to another point. Just because you're buried with gold doesn't mean to say you're wealthy. Because you might be buried with a gold cross, and that's the only gold that you've got. Describe what wealthiness is to early Christians. To be buried with wealth is to be buried poor. Because Christianity is about the basicness of Christ being nailed upon a cross, the nakedness of Christ, giving some of your wealth to the poor, helping out the poor, and all the rest of it. Just because you're being buried in a wooden coffin doesn't mean to say that you're poor. So I think that's a really important point to be said about this. Many people are buried in great cemeteries like Highgate in London, very famous people, and they're buried in quite non-pompous ways. They're not to be seen affluent in their burial practice. And this is a whole sense and meaning of Christianity. And everything's portrayed on this site. And lots of the remains are in a fine state of preservation. And there you go. Even with the sense of radiating to the central tomb, you've got them in different directions as well, away from the tomb. So you've got some in an east-west, south-north axis and all the rest of it. But the main thing, these are all buried in association. So in other words, there were no real rules in early Christianity. Why would you have rules in early Christianity? Because early Christianity is about love, is about peace, is about passing the words and teachings of Jesus Christ, which is those words that I've just mentioned.
Until it became an institution.
And then until it became an institution. I think what we're seeing when Christianity was developing and testing itself, testing the boundaries, to have a female priest, to have a female saint, was testing the boundaries. And unfortunately, I'm going to say it, Christianity became a piece of masculine control. And it's unfortunate I'm saying that, but the Christian church is dominated by a male pope. Have we ever had a female pope? Point
Yes.
taken.
You read about
Don't
the
ever ask a
female.
question in this room.
Kathy, you are 99%. Yeah, I think Kathy is right on that one. But 99% of all popes were in. Are you talking about the female who was actually thought to be a male? That one?
No, she actually had a baby.
Oh
Yeah.
Christ! Right. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. You know what I'm trying to say. Most popes, practically all popes in history, were in fact men. Exactly. Exactly. Supposed to be men. Do you know what? I'm going to get off this one because I'm digging myself a hole. Actually, so there she is again, and there's the street scene as they're excavating, and I think it's quite interesting that they're ripping up the whole street. And it's there. They're allowing the archaeology to take place. They're allowing the archaeology, and these are all these stone coffins around here, and it goes on this entire length. So if you're thinking there's 350 here, how many is there going to be on the opposite side? Another 350. It's a huge site, but these are all being buried in that new sense of place within the Roman world. Some say that in fact it was Christianity that led to the end of the Roman world. I don't really know the answer to that one, but I do know that when Christianity massed its powers and massed its senses of perception, there was a Roman emperor who fought a battle around 350, a pagan Roman emperor who fought a battle against a new Christian Roman emperor. And you could probably see at that point Christianity had changed. In fact, up until that point, Roman centurions would refuse to go into battle because they didn't want to kill someone. That was not the way of the Roman army, but obviously it's sort of become hand in glove. A bit hypocritical there. What I want to do, as I said to Keith before he left, there were some objects that I wanted to show, and there they are. Ooh, yes, exactly. Now, I'm going to bring Chris in on this. Does that look spectacular, Chris?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Is that Jet?
Yeah, that's Jet, yes.
When you
That-
said North of England,
That is Jet. Whitby.
Yeah.
It's always Whitby.
Where all the jet comes from.
Actually, not all the jet. There's some jet come up from places like the Isle of Wight and other parts of the world, but that's the best jet, okay? And what jet is? It's basically shale that's been compressed at such a hard. Everything's been compressed so much that it is in fact can be as strong in a way as some metals of the time as well. But except when you drop one of these on a big chunk of marble or bang it with a hammer, it goes into a million pieces. It's like cast iron. Cast iron, even though it's iron, different from wrought iron, it can be very strong. But when you fracture it, it's broken forever. This is jet, and you can. This is not actually this here. That jet is not buried with Our Lady. It's buried with somebody else, but. A ring itself with an intaglio in it, typical type of thing you'd find from Killeen in the drains. That's what we'll look at when we're in Killeen. Some of the intaglios, I want to see them again. And all this gold, they found bucket loads of gold on the site. More gold and pottery and various other things. And the gold itself, at one point, the gold itself goes back to the beginning. When I said about gold being stockpiled in graves and all the rest of it, people were just buried innocently with a gold bracelet and so on and so on. And slowly but surely, the Roman world started to miss out on its gold because it was all being buried with people. Towards the end of the Roman world, into the 400s, they needed to bribe tribes outside the Roman world. And the tribes would always want boxes and boxes of gold. And the Roman emperor was saying, we don't actually have it anymore. The likes of Honorius. And they would have to pay bribes because it was all being buried. When we look at, I think it's either Bulgaria or Romania. They plough the burial grounds of Romania or Bulgaria. I think it's more likely Romania, Roman burial grounds, and they're just coming up with bucket loads and bucket loads of gold. Because Romania was part of the Roman world.
Why were they looted earlier? Like during the Second World War, when you sort of things getting blown up and the craters and everything, you think, oh, you know, we found all this gold and it'll be looted, you know.
Actually, to be honest with you, this is something that I know a tad little bit about. When we look at what was happening in the Second World War, the Romans did deem the antiquity of the world. The Germans did deem the antiquity of the world that they had conquered as antiquity that they could use. Like the Romans did, to sort of show off, you know, we've got these Roman gold statues, we're going to take them into the new huge museum which was going to be erected in Berlin, or put it on displays in Munich or somewhere like that. I don't know of a single case that you've got gold in a Roman context or a Greek context being melted down by the Roman government. I don't have a single context for that. I don't have a single one. We can think about the amber room and things like that, which was adorned with amber and gold and all the rest of it. But the Germans didn't melt that stuff down, and they wanted to re-erect it in Germany, for example. It never happened. Who was going to say something?
Me. You know the necklace? I've always wondered, if it was small on your head, have you got a link to shut it? And
Yes.
Shut it, and if so, what does it look like?
I can show you now. There.
Oh, so just a little hook.
There's a hook.
Oh, thank you very much.
And this may look crude gold, but you've got a bit of a rose there, and this is basically all gold made into shape, and it's almost, you're thinking that this paints a different picture of what early Christianity was seen to be and was about. There was no real value in this. So they just thought, like, we'll just bury the person with it because we're Christians now. Maybe that's the case, but we'll move on from there.
When you see that the lady was buried underneath the church.
The church that was erected to her memory, yeah.
Yeah, what happened to the church? Because it was just demolished to build the road, was it?
It's obviously been forgotten about. They forgot, but the remains of the church, 2 sets of remains of churches were actually found. But she's obviously been forgotten in history. So at one point, they started, we'll just build a street through here. Remember, streets in history. Right, 2 points. what you usually find in a Roman city, or usually on the outside of a Roman city, you would find a road that led out of the city and a road that led into the city. So the road that led into the city was life, and the road that led out of the city was death. Along that length, you'd have all the mausolea alongside the road. But usually roads, even in the Roman period, were quite narrow. And you can imagine modern roads are going to expand anyway. And even if that was there, they would have just demolished it anyway to expand the road. But the artefacts weren't destroyed. And again, the bowl itself, a much larger image of the bowl. And you can see on the outside, it's been formed in a mould. Absolutely beautiful. And these...
Are those symbols?
Jet.
Are the symbols or the bowl meaning?
Yeah, Dionysus.
Oh, right.
Dionysus. These were actually found with her. Jet bracelets. I read somewhere one description, I don't know what this description was, it described the woman as travelling a lot. Well, we'll soon find out she travelled a lot from the strontium analysis. That's in the earlier years. Maybe we can get some oxygen isotope analysis to learn a little bit more else. But these are actually intact as well. They're not broken, they're perfectly intact. This isn't a pun, my main bone of contention is that these should have remained with the body. If they could have put it back in the sarcophagus, displayed the sarcophagus, covered up her body with respect, but actually showed her arms and her neck with this gold and stuff on. That's what I'd actually preferred. Because they found other items like this with the other bodies as well. You know my feelings on that. And look at this. Now I can remember my daughter having something like this. And these are the clasps. So I think there's... Yeah, it is. That's what I mean. My daughter, exactly. My daughter had a tacky one like this with little bits of glass, and then she broke it one day and it was as sharp as glass, so I had to get rid of it. It was going to cut into her neck. Because that's modern glass. But this itself is the oldie blue type glass. There's a bit missing there, a bit missing there. Maybe, obviously, it's like, the problem is with archaeological excavation is sometimes it's rapid. Maybe they were missed, or maybe that was the cherished, the other point is maybe that was a cherished item in the individual, and they thought, it's broken, we'll just bury it with her. You know, that's what we'll do. Because I always believe in archaeology that when you find things in the ground, you're not always finding the best of the best. A good example of that's the Sutton Hoo, the body buried at Sutton Hoo. You've got a broken sword, broken helmet, broken shield, and you're thinking, maybe these were broken at the point of the person being buried, deliberately. Yeah, but when you examine these objects, they're not the best of the best compared to some of the other artefacts we found. And it's likely people being buried weren't buried with the best of the best, because they're going into the afterlife. And in the afterlife, they can reforge their sword, if any of you have watched Lord of the Rings. And the forging of the sword. But you know the scene where the sword's being reforged. This was an old idea of Scandinavian law, okay? But it may have its early origins in earlier law, where it doesn't need to say, I'm sure the excavator would have found bits of the gold. And to be honest with you, there are very few archaeologists that are bent, so I think this was buried actually like this. Now, ISIS, they found within the site coins buried. I'm just going to do a little bit of an interpretation because I don't really know how to interpret this one. You're finding these coins associated with Romulus and Remus within these Christian burials. Maybe some people held on to the fact that you needed to pay the ferryman going across the River Styx. Because remember, this is a religion hang on a minute, this is a religion within its earlier senses was surrounded by pagan religions, and if Christianity was a cult, so you would have worshipped various other gods and goddesses at the same time of Christianity. So as Christianity becomes predominant, you're just thinking, I've got a little bit of the old religion, I'll just keep hold of it, and I might have a coin with me to pay the ferryman quickly, because we've only got a short time.
Would they have had tithes in those days, like later Christianity?
Tithes? No, I wouldn't say that. I've got no evidence of that. I can't say that. So again, or maybe this coin has another meaning, or just maybe the laissez-faire, they just buried it with the individual anyway. So you can imagine this is the early within, I was going to say, the early stages of rebuilding the road. So basically everything's been backfilled, whatever they've taken out of there, and this is what's going on. So they're rebuilding everything there within the streets. And note again what I've said. They're putting their utilities under the ground so they don't spoil their landscape with sky discs, wires and things going all over the place. And I think the people of Ljubljana have learned something from Western society. And what I've got here is actually, there it is, that was to do with the earlier lecture within Bavaria, the two localities, but that's another time. So jet bracelets are a local, that one there is exactly the same as the one that she's buried with. So it could be likely that these bracelets she's wearing actually came from Yorkshire, Whitby. Jet bracelets are a local project of jet occurring naturally in Yorkshire in the area of Whitby, and so she could have bought the jet bracelets in the market at York. Really? Could she have? Could she have come all the way from York? Could she have? But that's an interesting thing, or maybe she's given it as a present. However, that shows the cosmopolitan world. That is the Roman Empire in about the 350s, 400s. And maybe we could say we've rectified the issues of racial contamination, because we're all part of this cosmopolitan world that the Romans gave us. So are there any questions today? Oh, I've shocked you all into stunnedness. Come on, Chris, let's have a question. The first time you've ever been here?
I don't know. Bit bemused, well, not overwhelmed.
Good. Overwhelmed is good. Talking about Chris, it's Chris and Lynn, right? You've both got to ask a question because you're not here next week. And I've got to say it, don't forget your membership next week because you've already paid it. Right, anyway.
I was going to say, well,
Go for it.
Jet ring looks more metallic than
A jet,
jet
yeah.
is.
It's very strong and it's got that lustre about it. It does have a lustre. But there's also something known as Blue John as well, very deep sort of nice. But that jet itself does have a lustre to it. It's like magnetite. It looks like magnetite.
Yeah.
Bring it along next week. Any other questions? Jim, quick.
Why isn't there a scale in the picture? It could be 10 foot across, do we know?
No, it is about that size. Chris, Lynn, question. Joint. You can vote which one says it.
Nothing to say.
Chris always looks at you, Lynn. Go on, Chris. No? Right, okay then. Gillian and Alan and Jim, when we've packed everything up, I'll hopefully give you a raffle prize. If not, I will see you all next week. I'm going to tell you what we're going to be doing next week. Okay? So for those that want to know next week, before you all rush out the room, next week we will be doing the archaeology of Caractacus, otherwise known as Caradog. Have you all enjoyed today?
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming. I will see you all then. And sorry for nearly killing you, Goth. Thank you.
Anytime.